The moment I set my pen down on that conference table and said, "No," my sister lunged across it and grabbed my wrist so hard I felt my bones shift. Not my mother this time. My sister. And the room, packed with her lawyers, her husband, my aunt, and two people I'd never seen before in my life, went absolutely silent. My name is Joanna. I'm 31 years old. I'm a licensed CPA and a certified fraud examiner, which means I spend my working days untangling other people's financial disasters. I find the hidden accounts. I trace the shell companies. I find where the money went when someone swears it just disappeared. I never imagined I'd have to use those skills on my own family. My grandmother passed away in February, 3 days before her 82nd birthday. She died in the same house she'd lived in for 54 years, a 4-bedroom colonial in Naperville, Illinois, that she and my grandfather had bought in 1970 for $38,000 and which was now worth, according to the estate appraiser, just over $900,000. She also had investment accounts, a life insurance policy, a small portfolio of municipal bonds she'd been quietly building since the 1980s because, as she used to tell me, she didn't trust anyone who said the market always goes up. All told, her estate was valued at approximately $1.4 million. She left it to me. Not entirely. There were specific bequests to her church, to a cousin in Tucson she'd kept in touch with for 60 years, and a lump sum to my aunt. But the house and the bulk of the financial accounts came to me. My sister got nothing. I want to be careful about how I say what I'm about to say, because it matters. My grandmother didn't leave my sister out of spite or without thought. She left an explanation in a sealed letter that her attorney read aloud at the will reading, in front of all of us. It said that she had already given my sister, over the course of 15 years, more than $200,000 in direct financial support, paid off her car loans, covered her mortgage when she and her husband fell behind, paid for a kitchen renovation, helped with credit card debt on 3 separate occasions. She had records of all of it. She said she loved my sister, but that she had already given her share, and she wanted the remainder of what she'd built to go to someone who hadn't yet received it. My sister sat in that attorney's office and listened to every word of that letter with a completely flat expression on her face. Then she looked at me and said, "This isn't over." I believed her. I just didn't know what that meant yet. For the first 2 months, it was lawyers. My sister hired an estate litigation attorney out of Chicago and filed a formal contest of the will, claiming our grandmother had lacked testamentary capacity, meaning, she argued, that Grandma hadn't been mentally competent when she signed the document. This is a fairly common challenge, and it almost never works when the deceased was, as my grandmother was, someone who had updated her estate plan with full documentation of her mental state as recently as 11 months before her death. Her attorney had a cognitive assessment on file. There were 2 independent witnesses. The challenge was dismissed. Then it was the phone calls. My mother called me every few days. My grandmother was her mother, and she was grieving, and at first I tried to be patient with that. Grief makes people say things they don't mean, but the call stopped being about grief pretty quickly and started being about the house, about how my sister had 2 kids, about how it wasn't fair, about how Grandma would have wanted the family to be taken care of. I heard that phrase so many times it started to feel like a chant. She would have wanted the family taken care of. What it actually meant, I eventually understood, was give your sister the house. I said no, calmly, clearly, and every single time. Then my brother-in-law started texting me. Long messages, detailed messages, messages that outlined what the house could sell for, what their share would be if I did the right thing, what a reasonable person would do in my position. He included in one message a breakdown of their monthly expenses versus their income and what he called their shortfall. He sent it like a business proposal, like I was a bank and he was applying for a loan I owed him. I stopped responding. What no one in my family knew, what I hadn't told anyone, because I'd learned over the years that information shared with my family had a way of being weaponized, was that I'd already had the estate attorney place the house in a revocable trust in my name, the accounts had already been transferred, and I'd retained my own attorney 3 days after the will reading because I'd watched my grandmother's face when she told me, privately, about 6 months before she died, that she was worried my sister might cause trouble. My grandmother had been a smart woman. She'd seen things clearly her whole life. I trusted that. What I hadn't anticipated was the meeting. My mother called me in late April and asked me to come to my aunt's house in Downers Grove for what she described as a family conversation. She said she just wanted everyone to sit down together like adults. She said it wasn't about the will, she said. And I remember this exactly because I wrote it down immediately after we hung up. I just want my daughters in the same room. That's all I'm asking. I should have said no. I know that now, but she's my mother, and she'd just lost her mother, and I told myself that I could sit through one uncomfortable conversation. I told myself I was an adult who could handle an hour in a room with people who were angry at me. I told myself a lot of things on the drive to Downers Grove. I pulled up to my aunt's house and there were 4 cars in the driveway I didn't recognize. I sat in my car for a moment. I almost left. Then I thought about my grandmother's voice in the phone 6 months ago. The steadiness in it, the absence of self-pity, the way she'd said, just stay calm and don't give them anything they can use. And I got out of the car. The living room had been rearranged. The couch and armchairs had been pushed back to create a kind of open space at the centre, and a folding table had been set up near the window. There were documents on the table, a lot of documents. My sister was there, her husband, my mother, my aunt, and 2 men I didn't know, both in suits, both with briefcases, sitting in chairs along the wall like they'd been placed there to look official. No one hugged me, no one offered me anything to drink. My sister held out a thick folder and said, "We just need you to review these and sign." I didn't take the folder. I asked what it was. One of the men in suits introduced me as an attorney, though he did not give me his bar card or the name of his firm when I asked, explained that the documents were a property transfer agreement. The house, the accounts divided equitably among the family members. He used that word, equitably, with the confidence of someone who has learned that legal-sounding language makes people compliant. I said, "I'm not signing anything today." My sister said, "Yes, you are." I looked at her. I said, "Excuse me?" What happened next is something I've replayed many times. My sister's husband stood up. My mother moved toward me from the left side of the room. My aunt blocked the doorway, not aggressively, but she was standing in it, and my sister took 1 step forward and grabbed my wrist. I looked down at her hand on my arm. I looked back up at her face. I said very quietly, "Let go of me right now." She didn't. I have a professional background that requires me to stay composed in situations where other people are anything but. I have sat across tables from executives who've committed fraud and listened to them lie to my face without changing my expression. I have delivered findings that ended careers without raising my voice. I know what it feels like to be in a room where everyone else has more apparent power than you do, and to recognize that apparent power is not the same as actual power. I reached into my bag with my free hand. I had recorded every phone call my mother had made to me over the past 2 months. I had documented every text from my brother-in-law in a running log with dates and timestamps. I had taken photographs of the documents on that table from the moment I walked in before anyone spoke to me, a habit from work, photographing financial documents the moment they're presented before anyone can remove or alter them, and I had called my attorney from my car in the driveway and left the line open. I said clearly and for the recording, I am being physically restrained in my aunt's home at. And I stated the address. There are 2 individuals representing themselves as attorneys who have not provided bar card verification upon request. I am being presented with documents I did not agree to review, and am being asked to sign them under physical coercion. I do not consent to any of this. I am requesting that the person holding my arm release me immediately. The room went so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming from the kitchen. My sister let go. The 2 men in suits looked at each other. My mother said my name in a tone I hadn't heard since I was a child. That particular kind of quiet, that means someone has just realized they've made an error they can't undo. I picked up the folder from the table, set it back down without opening it, and said, "This meeting is over. I'm leaving. Do not contact me directly again. Anything you have to say to me can be said through my attorney." I walked to the door. My aunt stepped aside. I drove to a gas station 2 blocks away, sat in the parking lot and cried for about 4 minutes. Then I called my attorney and told her everything. What unfolded over the next 6 weeks was something I could not have scripted if I tried. My attorney filed an emergency motion the next morning regarding the meeting, the physical restraint, and the individuals who had misrepresented themselves as legal counsel. It turned out, and this detail still makes me feel a cold, clear kind of satisfaction, that the men in suits were not licensed attorneys in Illinois. One held a real estate license in Indiana. The other had a law degree from a school that had lost its accreditation in 2018 and had never passed a bar exam. My sister had hired them off a website that offered estate mediation services and apparently hadn't verified their credentials or had and chosen not to care. Presenting yourself as an attorney when you are not one is a crime in Illinois. It's called the unauthorized practice of law. Both men were reported to the Illinois Attorney Registration and Disciplinary Commission. Meanwhile, as part of reviewing the financial documents I'd photographed, my attorney noticed something. In the paperwork my sister's team had prepared, the transfer agreement they'd wanted me to sign, there was a clause that would have authorized repayment of a family loan from the estate accounts. The amount listed was $47,000. No loan had ever been documented. No promissory note existed. The estate attorney had no record of any such obligation. I, however, did have records. I had my grandmother's personal financial files, which she'd given me access to 2 years before her death, when she'd asked me to help her organize her affairs. There was no $47,000 loan in those records. What there was, carefully noted in my grandmother's handwriting in a ledger she kept in the top drawer of her desk, was a list of every dollar she had given my sister over the years, categorized as gifts, with a note at the bottom that read, "These are not to be repaid. They are given freely. I want this to be clear." That ledger became a central piece of evidence. My sister's estate challenge had been dismissed. The unauthorized practice of law complaint was proceeding. The fraudulent loan claim had been documented and reported, and the physical restraint. My attorney advised me that while it was unlikely to rise to criminal charges given the circumstances, it was absolutely usable as evidence of bad faith in any further civil proceedings. There were no further civil proceedings. My sister's actual attorney, the licensed one she'd hired for the original will contest, sent my attorney a letter withdrawing from any additional claims. I don't know what conversation happened between my sister and that attorney, but I can guess that a licensed attorney who'd just learned her client had staged a meeting with unlicensed individuals attempting to fraudulently coerce a property transfer had some things to say. I received one more communication from my family after that. It came from my mother, handwritten on a card, the kind she used to put in birthday gifts when I was small. She said she was sorry. She said she didn't know what the men in the room were. She said she thought it was just going to be a conversation. She said she hoped I could understand that she was in pain and hadn't been thinking clearly. I read it twice. I put it in a file folder with the rest of the documents from those months. I haven't responded. I've thought a lot about what I want people to understand from what happened to me. It's not that my family is uniquely terrible, though they did terrible things. It's that grief and money together create a specific kind of desperation in people. And that desperation makes otherwise ordinary people do things they would have sworn, a year earlier, they were not capable of. My grandmother knew this. She spent the last years of her life quietly organizing her affairs so that what she wanted would happen. Not what anyone else wanted. Not what was easiest. Not what kept the peace. She knew the peace would not last. She made sure her wishes were documented, witnessed, legally sound, and explained. The greatest thing she ever gave me was not the house or the accounts. It was the conversation she had with me 6 months before she died, when she sat across her kitchen table from me with her coffee and her ledger, and she said very plainly, "I trust you because you know how to stay steady when other people don't. That's a rare thing. Don't let anyone take it from you. I didn't. The house is mine. My grandmother's investment accounts are mine. I have not sold the house. I go there on weekends sometimes and sit in her kitchen and drink coffee at the same table where she said those words to me, and I think about what she built over 54 years in that house and what it means that she decided to give it to me. I don't feel triumphant. I feel the weight of it. I feel responsible to it. I feel, more than anything, grateful to a woman who saw clearly and planned carefully and trusted me to do the same. That's the whole story. I don't have a tidy ending with a lesson wrapped around it. What I have is a house in Naperville, a file folder full of evidence I hope I never need to use again, and the knowledge that when the moment came, I stayed steady. She was right. It is a rare thing. I've thought about that afternoon in Downers Grove more times than I can count. Not the part where my sister grabbed my wrist, though that image does come back to me, usually when I'm least expecting it. What I keep returning to is the drive there. The way I almost turned around. The way I talked myself back into going because I wanted to believe that a conversation was still possible. That impulse. The one that makes you show up anyway, that makes you try one more time, that makes you extend the benefit of the doubt past the point where it makes any sense. I used to think it was a weakness in me. I used to think I should have seen it coming and stayed home. I don't think that anymore. What I understand now is that the outcome of that afternoon had almost nothing to do with what happened in the room. It had everything to do with what I had already done before I walked in. The records I'd kept, the calls I'd logged, the phone line I'd left open, the attorney I'd retained 3 days after the will reading because my grandmother had looked at me across her kitchen table and told me, plainly, to be ready. The preparation wasn't dramatic. It wasn't clever in the way people mean when they say someone outmaneuvered someone else. It was just steady, unglamorous work done, in advance of a moment I hoped would never come. That's the thing about integrity that nobody tells you when you're young. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel heroic in the moment you're building it. It's the ledger my grandmother kept in her desk drawer for 30 years, recording every dollar, not because she was calculating, but because she believed that clarity was a form of kindness, that leaving accurate records behind was a way of protecting the people she loved from confusion and conflict after she was gone. She was right. That ledger became evidence. Her clarity became my protection, and the people who tried to take what wasn't theirs, I don't carry anger toward them the way I once thought I would. What happened to them was a direct result of what they chose to do. They brought unlicensed individuals into a room and called them attorneys. They fabricated a $47,000 debt that didn't exist. They grabbed the wrist of someone who had spent her career learning exactly how to document things like that. Every choice they made had a consequence that followed as naturally as anything follows from anything. I didn't engineer their downfall. They built it themselves, one bad decision at a time, and I simply stayed out of the way and kept records. What I want to say to anyone who recognizes something in this story, anyone who has been in a room where the people who were supposed to love you have decided that what you have is more important than who you are, is this: the most powerful thing you can do is not react. Not in the room, not in the moment, not with your emotions running hot and your hands shaking. The most powerful thing you can do is what my grandmother modeled her entire life. Think clearly, document carefully, trust that the truth, when it is accurate and complete and properly recorded, will hold up under pressure. She was steady her whole life. I learned steadiness from watching her. And when the moment came, it turned out that steadiness was the only thing I needed. I still go to the house on weekends. I still drink coffee at her kitchen table. It still feels like she's just stepped out of the room,